we're going to outline all the things you need to do to have a show. Some of these topics we'll go over in more depth in other modules, but it's nice to have a conversation about the big picture. First thing you need to do is to make lots of art. The further along you get in your career, the more you're going to combine that with the extra step of making lots of art that is ready to install. If you're working three-dimensionally, do you need a pedestal? Especially early in your career, when you're working in smaller galleries, alternative spaces, or nonprofits, you might have to provide your own pedestal. Does your work require a vitrine, basically the plexiglass box that you put over it so that people don't play with your art? Would your work be fine with just a little bit of Gulf wax? Gulf wax is an inert, malleable wax that museums use to keep pieces from being easily knocked over. You can make it warm and soft by mushing it in your hands for a little while. Mush is the highly sophisticated museum term. Then you roll it up into little balls and stick it on the bottom of your ceramics. When you stick the ceramic on the pedestal, it'll have just a little bit of a seal as the wax cools down from your body temperature. It's not going to keep somebody on a skateboard from knocking your art over, but it's a little bit more secure. If you're doing 2D work, do you need to frame it, or could you just put a wire on the back? With contemporary art, you don't necessarily have to have a frame, but showing staples on the edge of your canvas is just tacky. Artists often get around the expense of framing by mounting the work directly onto the wall, but this assumes the gallery's wall is the right kind of surface. There was an unfortunate craze in the 70s and 80s where academic galleries decided the way they were going to save money is by putting carpet on the wall so that theoretically it wouldn't show holes when exhibitions changed. This has always been a terrible idea, and yet you might run into it. One of my jobs when I taught at Wichita State was to administer a gallery in the art department. The carpet on those walls was so shaggy that I had a special 4-foot level that I used exclusively to comb the walls between shows. Even that didn't really help, because students could go in and just by rubbing their finger on the carpet, spell out strong opinions of the art on the walls. I once worked at a gallery in Texas that used light gray as the color of their walls instead of the more typical white. This was usually not a problem, but we did have one artist who made a series of drawings on glassine, a semi-transparent archival paper. Guess whose job it was to paint a small white rectangle behind where all of her drawings were going to hang? What other special needs does your work have, and can you provide that equipment? If you're going to be using digital projectors as part of your installation, there's a really high probability that you're going to have to bring the equipment yourself. If your work is anything other than boring, traditional, and straightforward, you might consider photographing yourself installing it step by step. Have a friend take pictures of you as you are doing every little part of it, and be prepared to write up those as instructions. Then, turn around and have somebody else try to install it following those instructions and see what needs clarification. What seems perfectly straightforward to you is likely to confuse the poor schmuck on the other end who has to install your work if you aren't around. You want to make it as easy as possible on the gallery, partly because you want another chance to show, but just as importantly, you want your art to not get damaged. Assuming you've made lots of art and it's ready to install, you need to be prepared to make the wall text. Are you going to have title cards next to every piece? Are you going to just put little numbers and have a list? Or are you going to have a list and hope that the viewer can figure out which one is which? Even if the gallery is going to do this work for you, you'll need to provide them with the information. Your name, the title of the piece, the media of the piece, the date, the price. You don't always have to put scale on the title card, because usually it's right there in front of the viewer. But if your gallery is doing a list, you'll probably need to add in the scale. Scale is always height by width by depth. Anybody who asks you to put it in any other order is wrong, and you should kill them. You want to make sure that you're giving them the price, even if you don't expect to sell the work. It'll be important documentation for insurance purposes, should anything go wrong. You'll also need to include an exhibition statement. There's a story that's probably the art equivalent of an urban legend, but it holds that a museum used security footage to see how long people would actually read artist statements, and they determined that anything over 150 words was not going to be read. If you're making your own title cards, you'll need foam core or mat board, some sort of sticky something, either spray glue or positionable mounting adhesive, which is available at frame shops, and then you'll need some way to get it on the wall. Funtack or something similar is going to work so much better than double sticky tape, or God forbid, Velcro. You could probably save a few bucks if you're friendly with a local framer by asking them to save for you scraps of foam core and mat board. They'll produce lots that is too small for them to use, but would be perfect for your title cards.